The Great Hall of the Valanthi Empire was the most beautiful place in the galaxy. Walls made of living crystal pulsed with soft blue light. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Thousands of nobles from 100 different species filled the room. They wore clothes made of light and metal, and things that humans could not even name. At the center of it all stood Princess Salith Velcora. She was tall. Very tall. Her skin was silver like moonlight on water. She had 4 eyes, 2 large ones in the normal place, and 2 smaller ones above her elegant eyebrows. Her hair moved on its own, like silk ribbons caught in a gentle wind that only she could feel. She was beautiful in a way that made other species feel like children, looking at a goddess. Salith was bored. She had been standing here for 3 hours. 3 hours of watching delegates bow and scrape and offer gifts. 3 hours of pretending to care about trade agreements and border disputes. And now, finally, the real reason for this gathering was about to be revealed. Her marriage candidate. The Galactic Concordat had demanded this union. For 300 years, the Valanthi Empire and the Coalition of Free Worlds had been enemies. Not fighting, exactly, but not friends. The tension was bad for everyone, so the Concordat, the great council that kept peace among the stars, had ordered a marriage to bind the 2 powers together. Salith had accepted this duty. She was a princess. Duty was her life. But she had expectations. Perhaps they would send a Draconeth warlord, one of those massive reptilian warriors whose scales could stop plasma fire. Or maybe a crystalline hierarch beings of living gemstone who had existed before most species learned to walk upright. Someone powerful. Someone worthy of the Valanthi bloodline that stretched back 50,000 years. The great doors at the far end of the hall began to open. Salith straightened her spine. She lifted her chin. She prepared to greet her future husband with the dignity of her ancient house. A human walked in, just a human. He was alone. No guards. No servants. No procession of advisors or gift-bearers. Just one man, in a simple, dark uniform, walking across the crystal floor like he was taking a morning stroll. Salith blinked all 4 of her eyes. He was not tall. Well, tall for a human perhaps. But humans were a small species. His skin was dark brown, like rich earth. His hair was black but gray at the sides. His face had lines on it, marks of age that most species would have removed with simple medical technology. He looked worn, used, like a tool that had seen too much work, and he just kept walking, slowly, calmly, as if he had no idea that 10,000 eyes were watching him. Salith could not help it. The laughter escaped her before she could stop it. It was a beautiful sound. Valanthi laughter always was. It rang through the hall like crystal bells. But there was nothing kind in it. It was the laughter of someone who could not believe what they were seeing. "This," Salith said. Her voice carried to every corner of the hall. "This is what the Coalition sends? A human?" The human stopped walking. He was still 30 feet away from her. He did not look angry. He did not look embarrassed. He just looked at her with calm, dark eyes and waited. "Do they mean to insult us?" Salith continued. "Humans discovered faster than light travel only 200 years ago. They are children, babies. They have barely learned to walk among the stars, and the Coalition thinks one of them is worthy of a Valanthi princess?" Soft laughter rippled through the noble crowd. The Draconeth ambassador showed his teeth in amusement. A group of Morvathi traders whispered behind their dark hands. The human still did not react. He just stood there, waiting. The High Arbiter of the Concordat stepped forward. She was a Morvathi, tall and thin, with skin like cracked black stone and eyes that glowed faintly orange. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of galactic law. "Your Highness," she said, "I present Commander Elias Okonkwo of the Terran Defense Forces." The hall went slightly quieter. "Survivor of the Siege of Proxima," the Arbiter continued. "Hero of the Kepler Corridor. Bearer of the Iron Star. The highest military honor humanity can give. And your betrothed, as selected by the Concordat's binding algorithms." Now the hall went completely silent. Salith felt her 4 eyes blink in a pattern she could not control, a sign of shock that she could not hide. The algorithms? But the algorithms select for genetic compatibility, strategic value, and survival probability of offspring, the human said. His voice was deep and quiet. He did not raise it, but somehow it filled the space between them. It seems, Elias Okonkwo continued, that humans score rather high on that metric. We are difficult to kill. Our children inherit that trait. Salith did not know what to say. This had never happened to her before. She always knew what to say. A new voice echoed through the hall. Emperor Velcora himself rose from his throne. Salith's father was ancient by any species standards. His silver skin had faded to pale white. His 4 eyes burned with the cold fire of someone who had ruled for longer than most civilizations had existed. The match is sealed, the emperor declared. The Concordate's word is law, even for empires. The wedding will take place within the cycle. This is final. Salith stared at her father. Then she looked back at the human. Elias Okonkwo met her gaze. He did not look away. He did not bow his head in submission. He did not puff up his chest in challenge. He simply looked at her the way one soldier might look at another across a battlefield. She had laughed at him in front of the entire court. She had called his species children and babies, and he had just stood there and taken it, without a single word of complaint, without a single flash of anger. Salith was beginning to think she might have made a mistake. 3 weeks passed after that first meeting. 3 weeks of formal dinners. 3 weeks of official ceremonies. 3 weeks of walking beside a human who barely spoke more than 10 words at a time. Salith had never met anyone so quiet. It was not the silence of stupidity. She had met stupid people before. They were silent because they had nothing to say. This was different. Elias Okonkwo was silent like a deep lake is silent still on the surface, but hiding unknown depths below. He answered questions when asked. He attended every required event. He wore the clothes the court provided. He followed every rule of Valanthy etiquette with perfect precision. But he volunteered nothing. He shared nothing. He was like a ghost in human form, present but not truly there. The court loved to mock him. They called him the coalition's insult and the princess's pet. They made bets on how quickly Salith would demand an annulment. They laughed at his simple quarters. He had refused the grand rooms offered to him and chosen a small space meant for minor servants. They mocked his lack of servants, his plain food, his strange habit of waking before dawn. Salith heard all of this. She said nothing to stop it, but she watched him. Every morning, in the gray light before sunrise, Elias went to the palace gardens. He exercised alone, moving through a series of fighting forms that looked nothing like the elegant Valanthy martial dances. His movements were brutal and efficient. No beauty, no grace, just pure effectiveness. On the 22nd day, Salith woke early and went to her balcony to watch him. The morning light was soft and pink. Mist rose from the garden pools, and there was Elias, moving through his forms like a machine made of flesh and bone. She noticed something she had not seen before. Scars. His simple training clothes left his arms and upper back exposed. His brown skin was covered with marks, thin white lines, rough patches, places where the flesh had been torn and healed badly. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Salith had never seen so many scars on one person. The Valanthy had medical technology that could heal any wound without a trace. Most species did. Why would anyone choose to keep such marks? She found herself walking down to the garden before she realized what she was doing. Elias stopped his exercise when he heard her approach. He turned and waited, his breath slightly heavy, sweat shining on his dark skin. "You were injured," Salith said. It was not a question. "Many times. Badly." "Yes," he replied. She waited for more. Nothing came. "The siege of Proxima," she pressed. "The High Arbiter mentioned it. What happened there?" Elias was quiet for a long moment. Salith thought he would refuse to answer. Like he refused to answer so many things. Then he sat down on the edge of a garden fountain. Something in his posture changed. He looked tired. Not physically tired, something deeper than that. Proxima Station was a human colony, he said. 40,000 people, families, children, workers, regular people living their regular lives. Salith sat down across from him. She did not know why. She just did. The Wraith Collective wanted the system, Elias continued. Rich resources. Good location. They sent a fleet to take it. They thought it would be easy. Surround the station, cut off supplies, wait for the humans to surrender. And you were there? I was the commander of the defense force. 300 soldiers against 12 Wraith warships. Salith did the math in her head. Those numbers were impossible. 300 against that kind of firepower? It should have been over in days. How long did you hold? She asked. 14 months. Her secondary eyes went wide. That is not possible. We made it possible. Elias looked down at his scarred hands. His voice stayed flat and calm. But Salith could hear something underneath the words. Something heavy. We ate recycled protein paste. We breathed recycled air. The water systems failed in month 4. So we collected moisture from the walls and filtered it through our clothes. The children got sick first, then the elderly. We held funerals every week, sometimes every day. And then we went back to the barricades and kept fighting. Why? The question came out before Salith could stop it. Why not negotiate? The Wraith Collective sometimes accepts surrender. They would have taken our children. Elias looked up at her. For the first time since she had met him, she saw something burning in his dark eyes. Not anger exactly. Something older, deeper. The Wraith use captured populations as labor. They separate families. Children go to training facilities. Adults go to work camps. The elderly and sick are considered useless and disposed of. That was their offer. Surrender and watch everyone I loved be processed like cargo. He shook his head slowly. Humans have a saying, Princess. Death before dishonor. For most species, that is just poetry. Nice words to put on monuments. For humans, it is a promise. Salith did not know what to say. By the end, Elias continued, there were only 800 of us left. 40,000 became 800. We were starving. We were dying. Our weapons were failing. We had nothing left except stubbornness and hate. What happened? The coalition fleet finally arrived. They found us still fighting. Still holding. The Wraith had lost 6 ships trying to break through our defenses. 6 ships against 300 soldiers who had nothing but the will to never give up. He stood up. She noticed that he winced slightly. His left leg was bothering him. You laughed at me because my species is young, he said. Because we lack your technology, your history, your elegant culture. And you are right. We have none of those things. He looked directly into her eyes. All 4 of them. But when everything is lost, when hope is gone, when every logical calculation says to give up humans, do not give up. We are too stubborn, too angry, too desperate to protect the things we love. He began to walk away, then paused. Perhaps that is why the algorithm chose me. Not because I am worthy of a princess, but because our children would survive things that would destroy anyone else. He left her alone in the garden. Salith sat by the fountain for a very long time, thinking about scars and silence, and the weight that one human carried behind his quiet eyes. The Feast of 12 Moons was the most important celebration in the Valanthi calendar. Every year, when all 12 of the homeworld's moons aligned in the night sky, the Empire gathered to honor their ancestors. Thousands of nobles filled the grand celebration hall. Music played from instruments that humans had no names for. Food was served on plates made of solid light. Dancers moved through the air itself, their bodies defying gravity through ancient Valanthi arts. Salith stood near her father's throne, dressed in ceremonial robes that weighed more than a human child. Jewels floated around her head like a crown made of stars. She looked perfect. She looked like a princess should look, but her mind was not on the celebration. For the past week, she had found herself watching Elias more carefully. She noticed things she had missed before. The way he studied every room he entered, marking exits and potential dangers. The way he positioned himself to always have a wall at his back. The way his eyes tracked the movement of guards and servants with quiet attention. He was not just a soldier. He was a soldier who expected trouble. Tonight, he stood 30 feet away from her, wearing a simple dark suit that the court had mocked. He looked uncomfortable among all the floating lights and dancing nobles. But his eyes never stopped moving. Salith was watching him when she saw it happen. A small shift. Almost nothing. Elias's body went still, in a very specific way. His head turned slightly toward the Draconeth ambassador's delegation. She followed his gaze. The Draconeth were a warrior species, massive reptilian creatures with scales like armor and claws that could tear through metal. Their ambassador had brought 20 personal guards to the feast. That was normal. What was not normal was the way those guards were slowly changing position. They were spreading out, surrounding the throne area, moving with the careful precision of hunters, closing in on prey. Salith's heart began to beat faster. She opened her mouth to call for her own guards. The lights went out. Complete darkness fell over the hall like a heavy blanket. Screams erupted from every direction. The sound of crashing glass and overturning tables filled the air. Somewhere nearby, energy weapons began to charge with a high-pitched whine. Salith reached for the ceremonial blade at her hip. She was a trained warrior. She could fight. She could. A hand closed around her wrist. Not grabbing. Not pulling. Just guiding. Stay low. Elias's voice was calm in the chaos. Move with me. Do not speak. Every instinct told her to protest. She was a princess of the Valanthi. She did not need protection from a human. She had trained in 17 forms of combat since childhood. But something in his voice, that absolute calm, that complete certainty, made her follow. They moved through the darkness like shadows. Elias guided her with gentle pressure on her wrist, never pulling, never forcing. His steps made no sound on the crystal floor. How did a human move so quietly? Twice, he stopped her with a soft squeeze. Both times, she heard sounds nearby: the hiss of breath, the scrape of claws on stone. Both times, there was a quick movement in the darkness, a soft impact, and then, silence. Bodies hitting the floor. Professionally quiet. Salith had not even seen Elias draw a weapon. They reached a service corridor. Red emergency lights flickered to life, painting everything in the color of blood. Salith could finally see. Elias stood beside her, a short blade in his hand. The blade was wet. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp and focused. The Draconeth, Salith breathed. They have been planning this. An assassination. If they kill my father and me, the succession crisis will tear the Empire apart. I know. You know? I have been monitoring their communications for 3 weeks. Elias checked both directions of the corridor. Your security services are compromised. At least 4 senior officers are taking Draconeth money. I reported this through concordant channels, but bureaucracy moves slowly. Salith stared at him. You discovered a plot against my family, and you said nothing to me? I had no proof you were not part of the conspiracy. The words hit her like a slap. You thought I might be trying to kill my own father? I did not know you. His dark eyes met hers. Now I do. You are not part of this. Your shock is real. Before she could respond, sounds echoed from down the corridor. Heavy footsteps, the click of claws on stone, the hiss of Draconeth voices. 3 warriors rounded the corner. They were huge. Each one stood 8 feet tall, covered in thick green scales. They wore powered armor that made them look like walking tanks. Their yellow eyes locked onto Salith with predatory hunger. The princess, one of them growled. Kill the human. Take her alive. She has value as a hostage. Elias moved. Salith had seen fast warriors before. She had trained with the best fighters in the Valanthi Empire. She thought she knew what combat looked like. She was wrong. Elias did not fight like a Valanthi. There was no elegance, no beauty, no flowing forms. He fought like a trapped animal, all desperation and fury and absolute refusal to die. He used the narrow corridor to his advantage. The Draconeth could not surround him. They could not use their size. They had to come at him one at a time. He targeted their weak points. Eyes. Joints. The gaps in their armor where scales met metal. His blade moved in short, vicious arcs. He took hits that would have killed a Valanthi. A claw raked across his ribs, an armored fist struck his shoulder, and he kept fighting. When it was over, 3 Draconeth warriors lay broken on the floor. Elias stood among them, breathing hard. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. His left arm hung at a wrong angle. "Dislocated," he said, almost casually. Then he slammed his shoulder against the wall. There was a horrible popping sound. He had reset his own arm. He did not scream. He barely made a sound. Salith stared at him with all 4 eyes. "What are you?" she whispered. Elias wiped blood from his eyes with his good hand. He looked at her with that same calm expression. "I am your husband," he said, "or I will be, and I do not let anyone hurt what is mine." The wedding was supposed to be the greatest ceremony in Valanthi history. 10,000 guests from across the galaxy, flowers that sang with living voices, a dress made of woven starlight that had taken 300 artists 2 years to create, fireworks that would paint the sky for 7 days and 7 nights. Instead, Salith stood in a cold underground bunker. The assassination attempt had changed everything. The Draconeth ambassador had escaped, fleeing back to his fleet with evidence of his failure. Now 3 Draconeth battle fleets waited at the edge of Valanthi space. War was coming. Everyone knew it. The Empire was under martial law. The palace was locked down. The beautiful grand celebration hall was still being cleaned of blood and broken crystal. But the wedding could not wait. The Concordat had ruled that the marriage must happen on schedule. Political alliances could not be delayed by something as small as an assassination attempt. The union between Valanthi and the coalition was too important, so here they were. In a bunker. With gray metal walls and harsh artificial light. 50 guests instead of 10,000. No singing flowers, no woven starlight. Salith wore a simple white dress. It was beautiful, but it was not the dress she had dreamed of since childhood. She did not care. Something had changed inside her since that night in the corridor. Since she had watched a human fight 3 Draconeth warriors and win. Since she had seen him reset his own broken arm without screaming. Since he had looked at her with blood running down his face and called her his. Elias stood across from her now. His arm was still in a healing brace. The cut on his forehead had become a thin scar. He had refused the medical treatment that would have erased it completely. "Another mark to add to the collection," he had said with a small shrug. He wore his Terran military uniform. The court had offered him elaborate Valanthi robes, but he had politely refused. This uniform was who he was. He would not pretend to be something else. Salith respected that. The High Arbiter stood between them, preparing the ancient words of the binding ritual. In a few minutes, they would be married, bound together by law and tradition and the will of the Galactic Concordat. Salith leaned closer to Elias. She spoke softly, so only he could hear. "You do not have to do this." He raised an eyebrow. "The political situation has changed," she continued. "War is coming. The Concordat would release you from the contract. No one would blame you for leaving. Do you want me to leave?" The question was simple. His dark eyes watched her face, waiting for an answer. 3 weeks ago, Salith would have said yes without thinking. She had laughed at him. She had called his species children. She had wanted anyone except a human. Now she thought about his scars, his silence, the weight he carried. The way he had fought for her without hesitation, the way he had watched over her family for weeks, saying nothing, expecting nothing. Simply doing what needed to be done. "No," she said. "I do not want you to leave. Then I am staying. The Draconeth will attack. Everyone knows it. If you are my husband, you become a target. Not just today. For the rest of your life." Quote, Elias stepped closer to her, close enough that she could see the new scars forming on his knuckles, close enough that she could see the shadows under his eyes from sleepless nights spent planning defenses with her father's generals. "Salith," he said, "I have been a target since I was 19 years old. I have buried more friends than I can count. I have watched stations burn and colonies fall. I know exactly what I am choosing. Then why? You owe me nothing. You owe the Valanthi nothing. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. On Proxima, during the siege, there was a moment when I was ready to give up. Salith blinked. She had not expected this. We had been fighting for 11 months, Elias continued. We had lost so many people. I was sitting alone in the ruins of a barricade, and I thought, this is it. This is where I stop. I cannot do this anymore. He looked at her with those steady dark eyes. Then a little girl walked up to me, maybe 6 years old. She had saved a piece of bread from her ration. She gave it to me and said, "You looked hungry." She was not scared. She trusted that we would protect her, that somehow, everything would be okay. His voice grew rough. I made a promise that day. As long as there is someone who needs protecting, I do not get to quit. I do not get to walk away. The universe is cold and full of things that want to destroy everything good. Someone has to stand against that. He reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her by choice. You are not weak, he said. You are a warrior. You are brilliant. You terrify most of your court. But you are also good. I have seen it. The way you treat your servants, the way you argued with your father to protect civilians, the way you looked at me when I was bleeding not with disgust, but with concern. His fingers tightened gently around hers. I am staying because you are worth protecting, and because somewhere in these past weeks, I stopped seeing this as a political arrangement. I started hoping that maybe you might actually want me here. Salith felt tears forming in her 4 eyes. Valanthi royalty did not cry. It was considered weakness. She did not care. Elias Okonkwo, she said. You are the strangest creature I have ever met. Stubborn, quiet, impossible. I am human, he said simply. It is what we are. The High Arbiter cleared her throat. If the betrothed are ready, we should begin. Salith did not let go of his hand. We are ready, she said. The ceremony was short. The words were ancient. And when it was finished, Salith looked at her husband, her human husband, and felt something she had not expected. Hope. The Draconith fleet arrived on the 3rd day of their marriage. Salith stood on the command deck of the Eternal Vigilance, her father's flagship. Giant screens covered the walls, showing the blackness of space filled with enemy ships. She counted them, with growing dread. 87 capital ships. Hundreds of smaller attack craft. Enough firepower to burn a planet to ash. The Valanthi fleet had only 31 ships. They are hailing us, the communications officer announced. The main screen flickered. A face appeared. Warlord Drethkar, supreme commander of the Draconeth forces. His scales were dark red, the color of dried blood. His yellow eyes burned with hunger and hatred. Emperor Velcora, the warlord growled. I will make this simple. Surrender the human. Cancel the marriage. Abandon your alliance with the coalition. Do these things, and your people may live. Emperor Velcora sat on his command throne. His ancient face showed no fear. And if we refuse, then your empire burns. We will take what we want anyway. Your choice only decides how many of your people die first. Against 10. Salith felt Elias move beside her. He stepped forward, not in front of her, but next to her. Equal. Partners. Warlord Drethkar, he said clearly. I am Commander Elias Okonkwo. The human you want. The Draconeth's eyes narrowed. The siege holder. The cockroach who would not die. I have studied your file, little mammal. You are brave for your kind. But bravery will not save you today. You are probably right, Elias agreed. His voice was calm. We are outnumbered. We have fewer ships, fewer weapons. The logical thing would be to surrender. He paused. But here is what you do not understand about humans, warlord. Logic is not always what drives us. His voice grew harder. You have threatened my wife. You have threatened her people who are now my people. That means I will not negotiate with you. I will not surrender. I will stand here beside the Valanthi, and we will fight. Either we will win, or we will make you pay so dearly for this system that every species in the galaxy will learn a lesson about the cost of threatening what we love." Drethkar laughed. It was an ugly sound, like rocks grinding together. Brave words from a doomed creature. "They said the same thing on Proxima," Elias replied quietly. 14 months later, I was still standing. Many of those who laughed were not. He reached out and took Salith's hand. She let him. "Bring your fleet, warlord. We will be waiting." The screen went dark. Silence filled the command deck. Every officer stared at the human who had just challenged the most powerful military force in the sector. Emperor Velcora spoke first. "You have committed us to a battle we cannot win." "No," Elias said. "I have bought us time. The coalition fleet is 18 hours away. We do not need to win. We only need to survive. 18 hours against that?" The Emperor pointed at the tactical display, covered with red enemy markers. Elias smiled. It was the first real smile Salith had ever seen from him. "Your Majesty, I held Proxima for 14 months with civilians and broken equipment. Give me 18 hours with the finest fleet in the sector?" He squeezed Salith's hand. "We will manage." The battle began 1 hour later. It was like nothing Salith had ever experienced. The Draconeth attacked with overwhelming force, expecting a quick victory. They were wrong. Elias did not try to match them strength against strength. That would have been suicide. Instead, he fought dirty. He used asteroid fields as shields, hiding ships behind giant rocks and striking from ambush. He sent out decoy drones that looked like real ships on enemy sensors. He laid traps in sensor blind spots. He made the Draconeth chase shadows, while real Valanthi ships attacked from unexpected angles. It was not elegant. It was not beautiful. It was desperate, and messy, and brutal. And it worked. Hour after hour, the Valanthi fleet survived. They took damage. They lost ships. But they made the Draconeth pay for every inch of space. Salith fought beside Elias on the command deck. She learned his methods quickly, adapting Valanthi tactics to his unpredictable human approach. They argued over strategy. They adjusted plans on the fly. They saved each other's lives with quick thinking and quicker orders. 12 hours in, half the Valanthi fleet was damaged. 15 hours in, they had lost 8 ships completely. 17 hours in, the Eternal Vigilance itself was hit. Fire erupted on 3 decks. The lights flickered. Smoke filled the air. Salith looked at the tactical display. The Draconeth were closing in for the final attack. They were out of tricks. Out of options. "Elias," she said softly. He took her hand. "It was an honor," he said. Then the communications officer screamed. "New contacts! Dozens of them! Coming out of hyperspace!" The tactical display exploded with green markers. Coalition ships. Terran battlecruisers. Morvathi destroyers. A rescue fleet larger than anyone had expected. 17 hours and 43 minutes. They had made it. The Draconeth fleet, already bloodied and exhausted, saw the fresh enemy arriving. Warlord Drethkar made the only smart choice available. He retreated. Later, after the medics had taken the wounded and the damage reports had been filed, Salith found Elias collapsed against a wall, blood soaked through his uniform. Shrapnel had hit him hours ago. He had been fighting wounded the entire time without telling anyone. "You fool," she said, kneeling beside him. He looked up with exhausted eyes. "Did we make it?" "We made it." "Good." He smiled weakly. "Told you we would manage." She leaned down and kissed him, their first kiss. There in the smoke and ruin of a battle that should have killed them all. "When you recover," she said against his lips, "I am going to teach you that you do not have to carry every burden alone." "Might take a while," he whispered. "I am stubborn." I noticed. She helped the medics lift him onto a stretcher. Her silver fingers stayed, wrapped around his scarred human hand. "Thank you," she said. "For standing with us." "Thank you," he replied. "For being worth standing for." Behind them, through the viewport, stars shone on a galaxy that had learned an important lesson. Humans were young. Humans were small. Humans had no ancient culture or superior technology, but when humans loved something, they did not let it go. And the Valanthi had just become something that humanity loved. The end.